Eishes chayil mi'imso v'rochoik mipnini michra. Botach bo leibalo v'sholo lo yachsor. K'malasu toy v'loiro kol yemei chayeho. Kapo posolioni v'yodeho shilcho lo evyoin. Noyed abashorim balo b'shiftoim ziknei oretz. Pia pascha v'chachma v'soiras chesed aleshoina. Soifio alichois beiso v'lechem atzlus lo yisochel. Komu vaneho v'yashruho balo v'yehalelo. Rabois bonois asu chayil v'yatolis al kulano. Sheker hachein v'hevel hayoifi. Ishoiras Adonai hi tisalo. Tenulo mi priyodeho. V'yalelu v'ashorim maseho.
These words are from the last chapters of the book of Proverbs. It is King Solomon's eulogy for his mother, but a lot that fits Florence. A woman of strength, who will find? The Rachab Mipni Michra, far beyond pearls is her worth. Her husband's heartfelt trust is in her, and he shall lack for nothing. She bestows good upon him and never harm all the days of her life. She rises while it is yet night and gives provision to her household and direction to her maidens. She spreads her palm out to the poor and extends her hands to the destitute. Fine covers she makes for herself. Linen and purple wool are her clothing. Back then, that was really fancy stuff. I know, Florence, we need to update it a little bit, but you get the point. Pia potra bechochma, she opens her mouth with wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. Give her the fruits of her hand, and let her deeds praise her in the gathering places. Today is the first day of Nisan. It's Rosh Chodesh. So the Jewish law says that you don't deliver formal eulogies on Rosh Chodesh. But it doesn't say that you're not allowed to celebrate a life. And everybody here, I can see the diverse group here, and everybody knew Florence, and everybody knew that Florence liked to celebrate. So we're going to celebrate Florence's life, and the best way that I can think of to do that is to invite up her children. So I'm going to ask Sherry to speak first, and then followed by Phil.
I told the rabbi I wasn't sure I could speak today, but in the end I found my voice. And it was Unit that helped. We texted this morning and I realized that this was the important thing my mom always thought about. That Brenda, Sonia, and myself are the torch. We all have a role, that our eyes twinkle, then smile when we say recipes, who called, twins, she moved to Israel, how's Eileen, how's AJ, how's Aline, will Sonia come? These are conversations that our community thrives on. Okay, I gave Ben hand cream and Eli a toy car that Rafi left. And still, to my chagrin, I have Unit's wedding present I was supposed to deliver 10 months ago. But none of it matters. It only matters that we had the conversation. Texted, phoned, Shabbat, celebrations, and of course, funerals. We're it. To forget or to honor. It's on us. They did their job. The last two things my mom said to me were, put 2 leaves in the Shiva table, and you and your brother look after each other.
Phil. Thank you.
this is a full box. I might need it. Before I speak the words that I've prepared, I want to let you know that my wife Eileen couldn't be here because she's undergoing medical treatment in Toronto. But she did send a few words, a few of her reflections that she wanted me to read. So here it is. For those who had the good fortune to spend time with Florence, they knew that she brought the sun with her wherever she went. Ironic. The following anecdote exemplifies this trait for me. In 1988, she and Harold came to my hometown of Toronto to visit my parents after visiting Phil and Cheryl and me in New York. This was just before Phil and I were married, and she was meeting my parents for the first time. My parents invited them for a day trip to my aunt and uncle's vacation property an hour north of the city. It turned out to be a crummy Toronto afternoon. It was cloudy, it was rainy. By most Torontonian standards, it was a day to just stay indoors and read a good novel. My mother describes the moment that her doorbell rang, just as my mother was contemplating canceling the trip to the farm. But as my mother answered the door, she was met with the sunny countenance of Florence, who explained, "What a beautiful day." This set the tone for the group and set the stage for what I was to understand was Florence's penchant for not being deterred by pretty much anything. The day unfolded the way she would have had it, actually. The four enjoyed a wonderful afternoon, creating a bond that they carried for the rest of their lives. Florence's love of life, no matter the circumstances, was the value that she committed to and shared with all that had the fortune to be with her. From the very beginning, she welcomed me into her life. I was almost instantly treated as her other daughter. She was there for me during the tough times and the joyful ones. Especially after I lost my mother, she stepped in to do what she could to fill that void for me. She did a fabulous job, and I will remember her for that. Florence was the model of a woman of valor, which is a concept from the book of Proverbs that describes a woman of inner strength, wisdom, industriousness, and active benevolence. I've been lucky to have her in my life. I'm sad I cannot join you in mourning this loss. However, I am with Phil and Cheryl and the rest of her family and friends today from afar. That's from Eileen. And this is from me. Almost 99 years, through triumphs and hardships and a million stories, she seemed to be indestructible, which is what makes this day seem so surreal. Pretty much everybody loved Florence and were amazed by her, and why wouldn't they? She was a phenomenon, a force, irrepressible, tenacious, garrulous, energetic, talented, vain, stylish, effervescent, sometimes overbearing, interested in everybody and everything. She commanded the room and brought warmth to it. Our mom led a mostly charmed life, but it wasn't always an easy one. She was born Florence Brody to James Brody and Ruth Cagna Brody, refugees from Tsarist Russia. She spent the first few years of her life in Ponoka, Alberta, a biographical fact that we never let her forget. The family moved to Edmonton when Mom was 5 years old, whereupon she started school at the fledgling Edmonton Talmatora, becoming part of the very first Talmatora graduating class, a biographical fact that she never let us forget. After completing high school in Edmonton, Florence enrolled at UBC to train as a dietitian, or rather, as she proclaimed emphatically, a therapeutic nutritionist. Her profession took her to Toronto, where she worked at Toronto General Hospital, and more significantly, where she met a dental student from Winnipeg by the name of Barney Mass, who was to become her husband. After Barney's graduation, the couple moved back to Edmonton, where Barney set up a dental practice, and Florence gave birth first to Philip and then 3 years later to Cheryl. The marriage was exemplary, at least as far as I could tell, and the household was a conventional one for the first few years until Barney suffered a heart attack at age 37 and died of a second one 7 years later. Florence became widowed at age 37 with 2 young kids to raise on her own. This was a different time, and prospects for her in Edmonton as a young single mother were dim. She sustained herself in the first years by raising her children with mixed results and being active in Hadassah and National Council of Jewish Women. But she was lonely. Socially, she was isolated in a couple's culture, and finances were strained. Still, she never let on about this to her kids. Finally, she grabbed hold of her future by upgrading her professional credentials, part-time at the University of Alberta, and then in 1972, after Sherry and I had moved away from home, she moved to Vancouver, where she was welcomed by family, as well as by her childhood friend from the Edmonton days, Nettie Prosterman. The two of them have been close friends for over 90 years. To no one's surprise, Florence was quickly welcomed into her new community, and she embraced it through her participation in Jewish organizations. In her new employment as a therapeutic nutritionist at Vancouver General Hospital Outpatient Services, her passion for bridge, her penchant for entertaining, her active subscriptions to the arts, and last but far from least, a succession of male suitors. It was Harold Morris who emerged to win her heart. For the second time in her life, Florence found herself a match made in heaven. In many ways, this was a classic opposites attract scenario. Florence, the high-energy social go-getter, Harold, the taciturn and socially reticent businessman, but they clicked. Boy, did they click. They traveled and entertained and forged a wonderful life together. Harold's passing left my mom alone for a second time. This time was different, however. This time, despite missing Harold terribly, she went on with her life without hardly skipping a beat, continuing to engage in all the pleasures that she had enjoyed with Harold by her side. Proud of her vitality and her age, Mom was always asking people to guess her age and then reveling at their reaction when they found out how old she really was. Let me tell you, it's not easy when you're introduced to people you've never met before and they think your mother is your wife. I prefer to think that that was a reflection on her rather than on me. As everyone knows, she loved to cook and bake and entertain. She was the consummate balabust. Her famous nothings were in fact really something. That's kichel, by the way. For her, a table setting was a work of art and a great source of pleasure and pride. In the later years, it was harder for her to do. I just can't do this anymore, she would tell us after one of her dinner parties. A month or so later, she was putting on another dinner party. I know, but I owed these people. I had to have them over. It's true, she was socially conscientious, but mostly she just loved to do it. The planning, the preparing, the social interaction, and yes, the accolades too. If there was a single theme that gave meaning to her life, the nucleus that her life revolved around, other than recipes, it was her family. Not just her immediate family, but her larger extended family too, and also her many friends. You see, Mom's life was all about the people in it. Oftentimes, people drift apart as circumstances change and relationships weaken. My mother was determined that those relationships would not be weakened and would carry on, and she was deeply troubled in the rare instances where those efforts were not reciprocated. As a result, she acquired many families during her long life, some by blood and some not. It didn't matter much. She was devoted to all of them, and all of them to her. All you need to do is look around you to understand what I'm talking about. First, there were the Brodys and the Cagnas, the families of her childhood, the cousins who continued to be connected to her, and some of whom are here today. And of course, her late brother, Gary Brody, to whom she was devoted, and her sister-in-law, Sonia, who was just that, a sister. Alan, Jeff, and Joanna and their spouses have kept it going. Then there was the Mass family, for whom she remained the esteemed family matriarch well into the third and even fourth generation, decades after Barney passed. Something that she cherished and was deeply proud of. There has not been an extended Mass family simcha that Florence was not invited to and that she didn't attend. When Harold and Florence sealed the deal, a family of 5 kids was created. We were all adults on our own by then, but Harold and Florence refused to use the word step in describing each other's kids. And indeed, to this day, well after Harold's passing, our relationship endures. Florence worked hard to maintain those relationships and was largely rewarded in kind. Brian, who couldn't be here for medical reasons, hosted Florence every winter for the past few years at his Caribbean home and schmoozed with her by FaceTime more or less every week. Janet stayed in touch regularly too, and just last week traveled to Vancouver from her home in London, England, mostly to visit with Florence. Patricia's son Travis, whose upbringing Florence was so involved with, is here from his home in Switzerland. He and Anna and their children Nina and Vito regularly faced with Florence and sent videos of the kids, which Florence relished. Florence had been looking forward to them joining her in Vancouver in just a couple of weeks to celebrate her 99th birthday. The Galvins, Eileen's family of origin, never treated Florence just as Phil's mother, but always as part of the whole merged family. Through a succession of marriages and other life circumstances, relatively few of the relatives still bear the names Cagna and Mass, or even Brody and Morris for that matter. Generations evolve and family constellations reconstitute themselves. I dare say that in another generation or two, these surnames may sadly all but disappear. Still, surnames notwithstanding, Florence insisted on keeping the core family legacies alive and the family connections intact. And then, of course, there's her immediate family. She was devoted to Sherry and me, and we no less so to her. Yes, there were strained times. What family doesn't have those from time to time? But our mother insisted that we be the best human beings we could be, and she taught us how. How successful she was is for others to judge, but pretty much every mom, something went wrong here. Like pretty much every mom, our well-being was always her first priority. To this day, I still cringe at the memory, going back to the Edmonton days, of my mom storming into my hockey team's dressing room in the middle of the coach's pep talk with a sweater in hand because she was afraid I would be too cold. More than Sherry and me and our spouses, Eileen and AJ, it was Travis and Ben who really caused Florence's eyes to sparkle. She simply adored them. At Travis and Anna's wedding in Croatia, while she was already pushing 90, Florence danced the night away. And I'm not talking slow waltzes here. So much so that she had to be attended to by a medical team the next morning. Asked afterwards whether the dancing was worth it, she said, of course. As for Ben, there was never a phone call between his bubby and me that he didn't include the question, how's my boy? It was clear she wasn't referring to me. Finally, there are Mom's many good friends who have embraced her and enriched her over the years. Too many people to mention, but you all know who you are. A few people that I must give special mention to, though. First, Rhoda and Joey. for always being there to attend to Mom lovingly when Sherry and I couldn't be. What a blessing to have that kind of family support. Jean and Conchita, who's been part of our family for as long as I can remember, and maybe even longer than that, and the incredible Froy, without whom, and without her husband, Paul's amazing cinnamon buns, we just simply couldn't have managed. Plus, Isabel and her family always made themselves available to help out when needed. Last but not least, Mavis and Jim were an abiding source of support to her and to us. Mavis would call my mom virtually every morning at 9 a.m. sharp to make sure she was okay, or as Mom would say, to make sure I was still alive. All of these wonderful people were not just caregivers and caretakers, but real companions to her. Florence would open her arms to anyone from anywhere, but her Jewishness was at her core. Hers was a Jewish heart, a Jewish soul. Tzedakah was one important element of that. Israel was another. She visited Israel many times. She traveled there with Harold as part of a larger group soon after they met, somewhat scandalous at the time, as I recall. But in hindsight, that trip to Israel was perhaps what cemented their relationship. She returned to Israel again when she and Harold took Travis there in connection with his bar mitzvah, and then again for Ben's bar mitzvah in Israel, one of the highlights of her life. And one last time, just a few years ago, where she was able to reconnect with Brody and Mass relatives living there. She yearned to go back again. She was also an integral part of the Sharet Tzedek community, which one could say was yet another one of her families, especially embraced as she was by Rabbi and Sorel Rosenblatt. I think she found a certain kind of refuge or serenity there, which is ironic when you consider that she landed in hospital twice after taking bad falls while attending shul. Florence sustained herself almost to the end with daily crossword puzzles, internet bridge, phone chats, emails, ebooks, current event programs, and Jeopardy. She loved to reminisce, and she loved a good laugh. If you can't laugh, she would say, then you're in trouble. In her last years, she continually reminded everyone that while her body was failing, there was still nothing wrong with her head. To be sure, even the doctors and nurses who attended to her right up to the end marveled at her astuteness and acuity of mind at her age. The message there, I think, at least for me, is that it's time for me to get back to doing crossword puzzles and maybe start learning how to play bridge. She lived independently and still drove the car, to everybody's chagrin, well into her 98th year. In fact, in a cruel bit of irony, last week she received a notice in the mail to renew her driver's license. No real surprise, too, that when just a few years ago she needed to renew her passport, and the officer said to her that given her age, he assumed she would want to renew for 5 years, she said, no, give me 10. True story. But finally, after 99 dynamic years on the go, that magnificent heart wore out, and she quite literally was out of breath. My mom used to say to me over and over again, I'm so lucky. I know how lucky I am. You made your own luck, Mom. And moreover, it's us who are really the lucky ones for having had you all these years to nurture and enrich our lives. Florence loved life. It's as simple as that. She embraced it, lived it to the fullest, and didn't want to let go. Thank you for joining us to pay tribute to her. She earned it. Zichrona lebracha, her memory will indeed be a blessing.
It's really not easy to capture Florence. You had to kind of have known her to really appreciate who Florence was. And so I see a lot of smiles out there, so I know that to a certain extent, you have a picture of Florence and her smile and her perfect hair and her perfect nails and heels and the whole deal, and the radiance that she brought to a room. But I want to share with you something that I think is sort of interesting and very timely. So as I mentioned earlier, today is the first day of Nisan. So, and I just did a calculation because Sherry and Phil had told me that Florence was going to be 99 on April the 4th. So that means that April the 4th, 1927 was her birthday. But it just so happens that April 4th, 1927 was the 2nd of Nisan. So means tonight would have been on the Hebrew calendar Florence's 99th birthday. Now there's something else you need to know about the beginning of Nisan. Nisan is not an ordinary month in the Jewish calendar. Nisan is an epic month because Passover happens in Nisan. And the Talmud will tell you that the years are actually denominated by Nisan. The real year begins in Nisan. And if you don't believe me, Hebrew months don't have names. The reason that Hebrew months don't have names is because we're radical monotheists. And pretty much every culture you know of names its months by the gods. So this is in the English month, it's March, which is the Roman god of war. The same is true with almost every other culture. So the Hebrew months are named the first month since we went out of Egypt, the second month since we went out of Egypt. Read your Bible until you get to the book of Esther, where we're totally immersed in Persian culture, when we take the Persian names of the month. This is the first month of the year. And it is the Mishnah will call it the Rosh Hashanah for royalty. And so there's a part of me which appreciates a certain nobility that Florence just brought into a room. And so it makes sense to me that Florence is born and we are marking her passing on this day, which is better than any other one in the entire Jewish calendar, the day which is the Rosh Hashanah for royalty. But I want to share with you something that happens in the month of Nisan, which to me says Florence perfectly. So every year you have your Seder, and there is one paragraph in the Seder which is said in Aramaic, and it was written in Aramaic because when the Seder was written, that's what everybody spoke. It was the lingua franca. It was their Yiddish, if you will. And it is when you break the middle matzah, right before someone steals the afikomen, and we say, Halach ma'anya da'achalna avatana ba'ara de Mitzrayim. This is the bread of affliction which our forefathers ate in the land of Egypt. And then we say, Kol dichvin yete v'yechol. Anybody who's hungry should come and eat. And if you've been snoozing until now this is the important line. Kol dichvin yete v'yifsach. Anyone who is needy. Now the normal translation for this is anyone who is needy, let them come and celebrate. Okay? So it's because we don't have a word in English for the verb of Passover. Passover in this sentence is a verb. Yifsach is a verb. So we say, let them come and celebrate Passover. But first of all, let's just stop for a moment and say, anyone who is needy, let them come and celebrate. And just let that ring in your minds and remember the last thing you did with Florence. And tell me, does that not really describe who she is? Right? That is, she would bring, now both parts of that sentence are signature Florence. You know, when Josephine Nadel tells me that Florence is her relative, I thought they really were close relatives. Her niece married this is a relative? I ignore people with closer relationships than this. But that was Florence. Whether it was Harold's children, whether it was other people, you sit down with Florence and you mention a name, she said, that person's my mishpacha. That person's my relative. All the time. I'm sure everybody in this room heard this. Right? Even the people who speak Tagalog know what my mishpacha means. and that was Florence. If you are needy, come and celebrate. And I thought I got rabbi privileges, right? So sometimes, you know, people have an extra gear for the rabbi, right? So here I thought, okay, Florence must really like me. I must be very charming. I must be something special. And then I discovered she's like that with everybody. she brings everybody together to come and celebrate. But there's another translation of the word Yifsach. The word Pesach in Hebrew most likely means come and feel protected, right? It's when God passes over the house, there's the slaying of the firstborn, and Pesach means that there are people in that house who feel protected. And I think that Florence really had that ability too. I'll tell you the kind of special protection I got. Maybe the second time she injured herself at Sharet Tzedek wasn't so much our fault. The first time, maybe a little bit more so. And I think, okay, somebody gets that kind of injury at Sharet Tzedek and goes to that kind of rehab and walking on crutches, which is not, something easy for her. Never bore a grudge. She mentioned it a couple of times. It was a joke. And just so you understand, Florence, that when that first one happened, it happened because she was dedicated to coming and saying Kaddish. She was dedicated to remembering all of her relatives. And you felt that sense of, this is a person who has my back, this is a person who protects me, this is a person who forgives me, this is a person who creates a safe space for where I am. And she would bring that sunshine of her personality to you whenever she met you. And you felt like, okay, you know what? There's stuff going on in the world, but I feel good. I feel happy. There's that energy. I visited her only last week when I got a call from Phil, and it was a beautiful scene. She was sitting there in the bed holding Sherry's hand, and there were good moments and bad moments, but like usual, I felt better for having been there. She was telling me stories and giving me advice and telling me that she felt comfortable. I offered to do some of the prayers, and there she is, belting out the Shema to me, like she always did and always could. And I as I came to understand the story, because I never drilled down on how old was Barney when he passed, how old were her kids, and I discovered the strength that she had. This was before Phil's bar mitzvah, and she raised these two wonderful children. She has enormous amounts of pride, and by the way, I'm still holding to my demand. I need to see the examples of your work, Sherry, which Florence promised me was in a stack of clippings and magazines that showcase Sherry's work. She was a person also who had that idea of anyone who is needy, let them come and celebrate. The shul was so important to her. It was a center for her. It was a place that had so many relationships, and she loved bringing people into it. And I want to read, Josephine Nadel is a very close friend of hers, and Josephine just couldn't make it back today, but she sent me an email, and I just want to read a few words from what Josephine said. She said, Florence embraced friends and family and community and built a large circle. Even during her moments of ill health and weakness, she would end every conversation with a heartfelt, I love you. She was loving, caring, and devoted. She had a joie de vivre that knew no bounds even until the end. She was excited to come to my Passover Seder if she could. She did not want to miss an event or function because she wanted to be involved, to be present, to be connected with the people she cared for. I would often drop over for 5 minutes and leave 2 hours later. We talked about everything, and she was aware and knowledgeable. And then Josephine also goes on to talk about how she had a new daughter-in-law, Isabel, and that that Florence made a bridal lunch for her and was just so welcoming and just wanted to make Isabel feel as much a part of the community as possible. And that was just another example of that. Kol dichven yetze v'yifsach. If you're ready to come, I'm ready to make the celebration. I'm ready to make you feel like you're at home in my house, in my synagogue, in my world. And she really was. She's a special person, and I myself, I'm having, the rabbis talk about acceptance, the psychologists talk about denial. I feel myself in denial. I feel like Florence is going to walk in, she's going to share a recipe with me, she's going to light up my room, and she's going to bring me this absolutely delicious smile. And it's just hard to believe that someone with that vitality is just not going to sweep back in. So as we all come to celebrate our Pesach, we draw closer to the holiday. Hopefully, at your Seder, you'll remember her as you get ready, as you invite those others to come in. She will be your inspiration to make sure you put on the extra smile, the extra charm, and make people feel extra welcome. Shetei nishmata tzura b'tzura chaim. May her soul be bound in the bond of eternal life. Let us say Amen. Because today is that special day, it's the 1st of Nisan, we don't recite the normal Kilmale Rachamim, the memorial prayer, but what we do say is we're going to say a chapter of the Tilim, chapter of the Psalms, which is going to accomplish the same purpose. I ask everyone to rise for that chapter.
מכתום לדוד, שומרני אל, כי חוסיסי בך. אמרת לאדוני, אדוני אתה, טויבוסי בלו לך, לקדושים אשר בארץ המה וידירי כל חפציבם. ירבו עצמייסם, אחם אהרו, בלעשיך נזכי מידם, ובלעשו שמייסם על ספוסי. Adonai menos chelki v'choisi ato toimich goyroli chabolim noflu li banimim af nachalas shofroloi avorechis Adonai asher yotzoni af leilos yisuni chil yoisoi shivi si Adonai lenegdi somid ki mimini balemoit לכן שמח ליבי ויוגל כבודי, אף בשרי ישכון לו בטח, כי לא תעזוב נפשי לשאול, לא יסיתן חסידך לירוי חס. תודיעני אורחיים סויבה שמחויס אספונך, נעימויס בימינך נצח.
Please be seated. So I don't usually do this, but I have an editorial comment. I got so carried away that I forgot to mention this. When Phil said that his mother said that she was a therapeutic nutritionist, I said, is there any better definition of a Jewish mother than a therapeutic nutritionist? Anyway, she did that both professionally and as a hobby. So, perfect. I'm going to have to save that one. That's it. Okay, well, she was Jewish. She believed in teshuvah, repentance. We conduct the formal part of a funeral. Funeral in Hebrew is halvaya, which means to escort someone, to be there to the very end. So we're going to escort Florence out. Those who need extra assistance, Howard, there's a golf cart here, so that'll be available after the casket makes its way out, and those who follow behind. It is not a long distance there, and this is a signature kind of a Florence thing. Harold was very tall. He always sat on the aisle, so Florence wanted to make sure that he had an eternal aisle seat, which means she, in her classic way, offered to be eternally in a middle seat. But so it's not going to be far off the pathway. After we finish the service here, the family's having the meal of comfort, and then it'll be followed by this evening. We're going to say the Shiva Minyan will be at 6 p.m. So just after we finish here, meal of comfort. All of this will take place at 1685 West 14th and it's apartment 900. And again, tomorrow morning, 8:30 a.m., we're going to have services. And then also at the apartment. I also would like to call forward the pallbearers, Jamie Greenberg, Chuck Greenberg, Ben Mass, Travis Black, Eli Bolin, and Alan Brody. And just for those who need a moment to grab their coat and get set, we'll just take a moment before we actually begin the procession.